Hey everybody, this is Kevin Bass from the.wars.com, and I'm going to be talking to you guys today about a controversial subject. The relationship between depression and veganism, or depression and vegetarianism. In other words, depression and plant-based diets. Now, many people will say online that the relationship between the two is not because of the diet causes depression, but rather the awareness of animal suffering causes depression, and it also causes veganism. I don't find this very plausible because I'm aware of animal suffering, but I'm not depressed. So that doesn't necessarily mean that awareness of animal suffering might not predispose to depression, maybe, so we can't fully rule that out. But I think one can be fully aware of much suffering in the world and still have an orientation towards life that's still overall positive without being depressed. But it's possible that simply being more aware of the terrible things in the world might make a person more predisposed to depression. It's possible. But I think part of the relationship is not in that direction, nor is it that people who are more depressed might be more attracted to strange diets, or maybe even to vegetarianism and veganism in particular. That's another explanation. I think actually the explanation is causal. I think it is that there are things in the vegan diet that are inadequate, that are causing people who are vegetarian and vegan to be predisposed to depression and general feeling ill at ease. And I think there's really good evidence for this. Okay. First, before we talk about this, I want to show you a meta-analysis of observational studies looking at depression in veganism in vegetarians versus non-vegetarians. So comparing vegetarians versus non-vegetarians, is there a difference in the rates of depression? And it seems very clear that according to the observational evidence that we can see right here, that overwhelmingly the large majority of observational studies show a strong relationship between vegetarianism and veganism and higher risk of depression. And this particular study is called Vegetarian Diet and Depression Scores, Meta-Analysis. It's published in the Journal of Affective Disorders, November 2021, volume 249, issue 1 by Sebastian Aucklenberg and Jette Borowski. And it was in 50,000 participants, a meta-analysis, and vegetarians indeed showed higher depression scores than non-vegetarians. And as I pointed out, I believe the association is causal, and I'm going to make the case here with respect to one nutrient in particular. But next, let's look at what are the dietary intakes. So here's an article called High Compliance with Dietary Recommendations in a Cohort of Meat Eaters, Fish Eaters, Vegetarians, and Vegans, results from the European Perspective Investigation into Cancer and Nutrition, Oxford study. This article shows high compliance, maybe, but it also shows a much higher rate of deficiency among vegans and vegetarians than it does among meat eaters. And we can see this very clearly in the graph. So in Epic Oxford, the prevalence of nutritional deficiencies was higher among vegans, despite better overall health outcomes. And so vegans tended to be deficient in protein, vitamin A, B2, B12, calcium, iron, zinc, selenium, and iodine. And we can see that very clearly here with when you see the red bars: protein, vitamin A, vitamin B2, vitamin B12, calcium, and then bioavailable iron, bioavailable zinc, selenium, and iodine. And for the purpose of this video, we're going to look at iron. In future videos, by the way, I'm going to be doing pretty much all of these. I'm going to look at all of these in the same detail. I'm going to be looking at iron in this particular video. And we're going to have a series of videos where we're going to examine the mental health evidence for different nutrient deficiencies associated with vegetarianism and veganism in order to isolate how we can help people who who have psychological problems and are on these diets. So if there's a way to give people the adequate nutrition such that they're able to then kick, quote unquote, the depression or their psychological problem owing to the nutrient deficiency, that would be really good, and we can help a lot of people that way. And that's what I'm interested in. Partly because I've been on a vegan and vegetarian diets before and I felt terrible. And I want to understand why and help people to understand why so that they can continue doing their vegan and vegetarian diet, because I know it's important to a lot of people, without having the psychological problems that are sometimes accompanying vegan and vegetarian diets according to the observational studies, which I believe is causal. Now, let me go make the case that it's causal. Okay, here we see iron, bioavailability adjusted iron intake. Among vegans, there's inadequate intake according to the EAR, the estimated average requirement, and this is actually the bare minimum. The intake at which 50% of the population will be deficient, literally deficient, like biologically deficient, not just the RDA, which is a standard deviation or two above. The EAR, I think it's 2 standard deviations above the EAR. No, this is the EAR. So 50% of the people who are below this intake will be truly like deficient. So that means that all the people who are below this intake, if there's a normal distribution around intake in these groups, this is approximately the percentage of people in these groups that are going to be deficient and literally biologically deficient for this nutrient. And so in this case, male vegans have 11.5% inadequate intake. So 11.5, 1 out of 10, or 1 out of 8 actually, nearly 1 out of 8 male vegans has an inadequate intake of iron. And then the same goes for the women, the females. So it's actually, in this case, 13%. It's more than 1 out of 8, almost 1 out of 7 women have an inadequate intake of iron. And among the vegetarians, it's even worse. 19.2% of women, so almost 1 out of 5, has an inadequate intake. And then for men, it's similar, 1 out of 8, 1 out of 9 for men have inadequate intake, according to the bare minimum requirements. Okay, so does this actually end up, though, reflecting in blood values? So if you go look at the ferritin levels, ferritin is an indicator of body iron stores. If you look at ferritin, are the ferritin levels, do they tend to be deficient and lower in vegetarians versus non-vegetarians in such a way that might predispose to deficiency? So it says the goal of the study was to review published data, the study is called Iron Status of Vegetarian Adults, a review of the literature. And it says the goal of the study was to review published data on iron status among vegetarian adults. 13 original articles met the inclusion criteria. Among female vegetarians, the percentage of the sample with ferritin below 12 micrograms per liter or 12 nanograms per milliliter ranged from 12 to 79%. Wow. So in the studies that were conducted on female vegetarians, the women below 12 nanograms per liter or 12 nanograms per milliliter, 12 micrograms per liter or 12 nanograms per milliliter, right, was between 12 and 79%, which is the deficiency level. So you can see this on the Mayo Clinic website, ferritin test procedures, ferritin test. For women, the normal range is 11 to 307 micrograms per liter. So if you're below 11 or 12, you're deficient. So and it also says an inadequate hemoglobin concentration range from 6 to 30%. So between 1 and 15, 1 and 20, all the way up to, in some studies, 1 in 3 women actually had iron deficiency anemia, so like not enough red blood cells. This is almost as bad as it gets. And it says among males, the range of ferritin below 12 micrograms per liter across the studies was 1.7% to 29%. And interestingly, the male deficiency cutoff is actually about twice as much as the female, so this is being quite conservative. It should be substantially higher than 12 micrograms per liter in order not to meet the cutoff, so these percentages are probably much higher. for men who are truly deficient, because the cutoff is higher than the one that's given in the paper. But nonetheless, it says a higher percentage of vegetarian females compared to non-vegetarian participants had ferritin below deficiency cutoff in all but one study. So in one study, it's 34% of vegetarian females versus 0%, 47 versus 42%, 18% versus 13%, 27.8% versus 6.5%. 79% among Indians, 56% among Caucasians versus 27% the non-vegetarian population in those studies. So, yeah, it's super clear that there are more vegetarian females who are deficient by quite a substantial degree than non-vegetarian females. And so it's not just the intakes that are lower that would indicate a potential for inadequate intake, but also the actual blood values in ferritin that are lower. And it says serum ferritin was lower in male vegetarians than male non-vegetarians in all the studies, 11% among vegans, and 21% among vegetarians compared to 6 and 7% among high and moderate meat consumers. So double or triple, or almost quadruple. 3% of vegetarians and 25% of vegans versus 0% of non-vegetarians. And then again, 29% versus 7% and 9% versus 0%. So it's like triple or quadruple in some cases, or infinitely higher in some cases. Rate of lower serum ferritin deficient vegans and vegetarians among men. Vegetarians have a high prevalence of depleted iron stores, it says. A higher proportion of vegetarians compared to non-vegetarians had iron deficiency anemia. This is especially true for premenopausal vegetarian women. Okay, cool. So, what are some of the symptoms, the clinical symptoms of iron deficiency without anemia? And this is in the journal of, I guess it's called Clinical Case Reports. And it's by a person named Esa Sopi, and they're in Finland. Iron deficiency without anemia, a clinical challenge. The clinical message of this paper is one should always consider iron deficiency without anemia as the cause of persisting, unexplained, non-specific, often severe symptoms, regardless of the primary underlying disease. The symptoms of iron deficiency anemia may arise from the metabolic systems where many proteins are iron-containing. Long-standing iron deficiency may be challenging to treat. So, many different proteins in the body require iron in order to function properly. And if they don't have enough iron, they're not going to function properly. So many systems in the body, many biological mechanisms are not going to function properly if you're deficient in iron, despite not having anemia. So without anemia, you're still going to get a clinical syndrome, or you're going to tend to get a clinical syndrome of iron deficiency, but without anemia. So it's not necessarily what you're going to get with a full blood count. So it says, introduction, iron deficiency may be a severe, despite normal hemoglobin and full blood count. Symptoms which may be prolonged and debilitating should raise a clinical suspicion of iron deficiency even if full blood count is normal. A lifelong history of blood loss, such as from abundant menstruation, pregnancies, blood donations, accident surgeries, as well as a history of celiac disease, atrophic gastritis, and drugs limiting gastric acid secretion should be taken into consideration. Ferritin, in this case she used a 30 microgram per liter cutoff, is most sensitive and specific indicator of iron deficiency, although its pitfalls need to be taken into consideration. However, the ferritin concentration may be near normal, while the iron staining of bone marrow aspiration sample is devoid of iron. So you can still have a normal ferritin, so it gets even more complicated. Furthermore, in determining iron status, it is essential not only to rely on results of a single test, but to consider the whole picture. Iron therapy should be monitored with repeated ferritin determinations with a target ferritin concentration of above 100 micrograms per liter and carried out until symptoms have resolved. When iron treatment is discontinued, serum ferritin should be determined to ensure that the levels remain stable. Iron should be reinstituted if ferritin concentration drops and symptoms reappear. And it mentions here, iron deficiency anemia is a late manifestation of iron deficiency, okay? It's not what you get early on. Both of which are common medical conditions in everyday clinical practice. Some 10 to 20% of menstruating women have iron deficiency, and 3 to 5% of them are frankly anemic. Iron deficiency may often be asymptomatic and go undiagnosed for a long period of time. And he goes on to write about some technical matters. So symptoms and differential diagnosis. So weakness, fatigue, difficulty in concentrating, and poor work productivity are non-specific symptoms ascribed to low delivery of oxygen to body tissues and decreased activity of iron-containing enzymes. The extent to which these non-hematologic, so not related to the red blood cells, effects of iron deficiency are manifested before anemia develops may be unclear. So they write about their clinical experience. They say, during my 30-year career as an internist with a special interest in thyroid diseases and hematology, I've met hundreds of patients, mainly menstruating females, who seek advice because of prolonged 1 to 25 years history of fatigue, brain fog, muscle and joint pains, weight gain, headache, dyspnea, palpitations sometimes associated with sleep disturbances, arrhythmia, lump in the throat, or difficulty swallowing, and restless legs. The patients have often received a spectrum of diagnoses such as subclinical hypothyroidism, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, chronic Lyme disease, burnout, and overtraining. Blood count is usually normal. At referral, their serum ferritin concentrations have ranged between 1 to about 150 micrograms per liter. If there's no obvious reason for iron deficiency, such as celiac disease, multiple blood donations, multiple pregnancies, or long periods of abundant menstruation, the differential diagnostics at serum ferritin above 50 micrograms per liter has included liver and kidney diseases, et cetera, et cetera. So there's many reasons for having an iron deficiency, an iron deficiency. But the point here is that this woman, who I think it's a woman, for whatever reason, I guess Essa strikes me as a female name, so I thought it's a woman. I'm not sure, because I don't know Finnish names. Finnish names are strange to me, okay? Not to offend any Finns, but to me they're strange, so it's a joke. But the point is that there's such a thing as having normal full blood count, normal red blood cells, but be deficient in iron and benefit from supplementation with iron. And this is supported by the randomized controlled trial literature. So let's check this out. Here's a paper called The Efficacy of Early Iron Supplementation on Postpartum Depression, a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial, and it's published in the European Journal of Nutrition in 2015 by Mahdi Sheikh et al., PMID 267-15522, for those nerds out there. And the purpose of the study, according to the abstract, was to evaluate early iron supplementation in non-anemic mothers with postpartum depression. The methods: this randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial evaluated 70 mothers with postpartum depression. 1 week after delivery, the mothers were randomly allocated to the iron-treated and placebo-treated groups. After 6 weeks, the improvement in postpartum depression symptoms was compared between the two groups. Results: ferritin significantly increased in the iron-treated group, but not in the placebo group. After intervention, ferritin was higher in the iron-treated group. The rate of iron deficiency significantly decreased in the iron-treated group, but not in the placebo group. After intervention, the rate of iron deficiency was higher in the placebo group, 31.4% versus 8.5%. That's a big difference, a fourfold difference in the rate of iron deficiency between the two groups, depending upon whether they're treated with iron. The Edinburgh Postnatal Depression Scale, EPDS score, was significantly decreased in the iron-treated group. So their depression score was decreased in the iron-treated group, but not in the placebo group. After intervention, the EPDS score was lower in the iron-treated group, 9 versus 12 in the placebo group. The improvement rate for postpartum depression was significantly higher in the iron-treated group, so 42.8% improvement rate versus 20% improvement rate. After interventions, mothers with continued postpartum depression had lower ferritin than the improved mothers. So those who continued having the depression tended to have low ferritin. There was a correlation. Mothers with continued depression had a higher rate of iron deficiency compared to improved mothers. A 27% rate of iron deficiency in those with continued depression versus only a 4.5% rate in those who improved. The conclusions: early iron supplementation in mothers with postpartum depression significantly improves the iron stores and causes a significant improvement in postpartum depression with a 42.8% improvement rate during 6 weeks. Continued postpartum depression might be related to lower postpartum ferritin levels in untreated mothers. The point of all of this is, if vegans have an inadequate intake of iron, vegans and vegetarians, and if this is reflected in blood tests showing a consistently lower iron status in this population, including iron deficiency anemia, but also iron deficiency without anemia, and if the non-specific symptoms of iron deficiency are things like fatigue, difficulty concentrating, poor productivity, etc., tiredness, etc., and if you take depressed people who recently they gave birth, and that involves sometimes a substantial amount of blood loss, which can result in anemia, in iron deficiency. And if in that group you give them iron and you substantially improve their depression scores, that's a really strong case that iron levels in vegans and vegetarians, lower iron levels, is probably causal for the higher rates of depression among vegans and vegetarians. I think you have a really iron-tight case. We do need intervention studies. We need a randomized controlled trial among vegans and vegetarians out in the community with depression, and seeing if we add iron to their antidepressant treatment, seeing if we get better improvements in their depression. And I bet you $1 million you're gonna see that. We don't have that study, but we need that study in order to confirm this. But I have shown through observational studies, through the relationship between lower iron levels and basically things that look a lot like depression, and then randomized controlled trials on people with low iron levels, I've made a really strong case that iron is really important for the mental health of vegans and vegetarians. So if you are a vegan and vegetarian, you are having symptoms of depression, fatigue, lack of concentration, you're just not doing well, you're not thriving, one thing you should get checked is you should get checked your ferritin. Get checked of course, have a whole blood, I can't even remember what it's called, like a whole blood smear, whatever it is, where you check your different levels of your different blood cells. A whole blood count, I think it's called. In any case, and also there's other more specific tests for iron deficiency that you can also check into as well. You can get a more comprehensive panel. And I encourage you, there's companies that can do this to get a somewhat comprehensive panel looking at your iron status. And if you have low iron, trying to supplement with it based on that lower iron might be a good idea. Now, there is an important caveat here, and the important caveat is that excessively high levels of iron can predispose to mortality. Things like heart failure, things like atherosclerosis. High iron levels predispose to worse cardiovascular outcomes. So you don't want to get too high. You don't want to over-supplement. You want to make sure you're getting into the right range. And if you're vegan and vegetarian, you are having problems with fatigue and depression, and probably especially if you're female, this is something to really put your eye on and make sure that you're doing the right way, because you don't want to mess around with having low iron. It's gonna, you don't want to have periods in your life where you're not feeling good. It's gonna harm your life, you know? It's gonna make your life worse. It's gonna make the life of people around you's life worse. It's not gonna be something you want for substantial periods of time. It's not gonna be healthy for you, it's not gonna be good for you, it's not what you want in your life. So get it treated, get it checked out and get it treated if you're having some of these issues. See what you can do about it. This is just one of many videos I'm gonna make about this. We're gonna look at other mechanisms And then I'm gonna have a comprehensive a list of nutrients that are important to maintain, that are often inadequately consumed in vegetarian and vegan diets, that vegans and vegetarians can keep an eye on for their mental health. And so it's kind of a mental health and also a brain health for vegans and vegetarians series, and this is just the first video in that series. And I hope you guys appreciate it. I hope you liked it. If you did, click the like button. Click the like button right now. Click the like button. I want to curse, but I'm not like in the cursing mood right now. Click the like button. Click the subscribe button. Subscribe to this channel. This is some good stuff. So, and send a comment, write a comment, say for the algorithm, hail the algorithm. Because it's helping. It's getting some of my videos actually picked up by the algorithm. The algorithms are starting to pick up my videos and starting to promote them, which is crazy. I'm starting to see like randomly my videos will start jumping into the Twitter algorithm, and like suddenly I'll start getting a ton more views because it starts showing a bunch of people my videos. Twitter is, which is awesome. I love it. And this only started to happen, and that's awesome. And you guys writing for the algorithm and writing algo, you can write just algo in the comments, or just write random stuff and then write algo. It's gonna help the video. It's gonna help me. So if you guys wanna help me, you guys wanna make this bigger, this channel bigger, and get this information out to more people, leave a comment, leave a random old comment. If you guys wanna check out my other social media on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and also a Patreon, KEVINNBASS, Kevin and Bass, KEVINNBASS, that's 2 N's. Patreon is great. Send me money. If you watch all my videos, you listen to all my podcasts, sign up as a patron, dude, my friend. That would be much appreciated. And you can also send a direct donation. I also do consultations. Send me a direct message if you want a consultation, or go to my website, thedietwars.com, and we've got consultations set up for you, my friend. So please do that. And then check out my podcast at The Kevin Bass Show, and then check out K-Bass Philadelphia on YouTube. Search it, K-Bass Philadelphia, for my YouTube channel. You can get my YouTube channel. It's going to pop right up. And if you have any ideas or criticisms, or constructive criticism, or compliments, leave them in the comments. Let me know how well I'm doing or how bad I'm doing. Assuming they're constructive, hopefully that would be much appreciated. I think that's it. All right, there's one more thing, but I can't remember what it is. But in any case, that's it for now. That's it for today. I hope you like this. This is part of a series. We're going to do basically all of these potential nutrients that could be responsible for different health, brain health, and mental health outcomes in vegetarians and vegans. And I'm really excited about it, and I hope you guys are too. Peace.